JJ, would you mind to begin with explaining how a team ends up 6th in the league at the end of last season and gets relegated in France?
Well, I'll do my best. So Lyon, obviously the dominant force of French football from the early 2000s, fallen on slightly harder times over the best part of the last decade or so. Now, just to break down the story completely, introduce like all the main players, you have the current face of the ownership, the American John Textor, who also has a host of other clubs through his Eagle Football Holdings Group, which includes Brazilian giants Botafogo. He took over from the immensely popular former owner Jean-Michel Aulas, one of the most influential figures in modern French footballing history. And that in itself has been quite bitter and been very emotional for the Lyon fan base to go through, for Aulas as well as the departing owner, and obviously a sense of much frustration, a source of much frustration for Textor as the incoming ownership. So now in French football, for those who are less familiar with it than Andy and I, there is the financial watchdog for the professional French clubs called the DNCG. There's also one for the semi-professionals, but I'm not going to get into that branch of the DNCG. And this body carries out summer and winter budget checks on all professional clubs. Last winter, there was provisional relegation that was handed down to Lyon unless their financial situation improved. Now, fast forward not even 6 months to this summer, and that relegation to Ligue 2 has been confirmed despite plenty of transfer activity, notably Ryan Cherki joining Manchester City, Europa League qualification via the Ligue, and Textor also selling his minority share in Crystal Palace. Now, Lyon can and have appealed this verdict, and generally this is an extremely tough time for professional French football clubs on the whole, given that there's continued uncertainty regarding TV rights money. So for further context, the DNCG, who carry out these winter and summer checks on the budget, have ordered all professional clubs. So it doesn't matter whether you're PSG or whether you're a minnow in Ligue 2, all clubs have been ordered to not budget with any TV rights money, but also, and crucially, no unconfirmed transfer revenue either, which had previously been part of Textor's tactic in the past to sort of maneuver Lyon past the DNCG. Now, John Textor, I mentioned earlier, is the face of the ownership of Lyon, but to say that Lyon is sort of John Textor's club would be sort of stretching it a bit far. Ares is a financial group that aided Textor in the acquisition of Lyon, and they're the most likely source to fill a financial hole, which is somewhere in the region of sort of 70 to 80 million euros per reports. And this has the potential to possibly destabilize Textor's position as sort of the figurehead of Lyon, given the current situation within the ownership, and now this pressure, this sudden financial pressure for a large amount of money to be found in a very short space of time in order for Lyon to not only continue to play in Ligue 1, but also to be able to compete in Europe next season, which obviously is going to be a key part of future revenues for the club, especially given that at this moment in time, there is no TV rights money to be budgeted with and no ability to predict future transfers between now and the end of the summer window.
Well done, JJ. You've done an excellent job. I totally get it, which means everybody listening totally gets it. However, Andy, this is chaos, is the only way I can describe it, Andy. How about you? Is there some sympathy for Lyon from what, despite John Textor's perhaps creative accounting, but what JJ is saying is that teams got caught out with the, chaos of the French TV deals on football. Is there some sympathy that Lyon, like many other teams, were expecting revenue from TV that has never materialised?
Well, look, I think there needs to be a sort of division here. I think a lot of the reaction in France, even from rival supporters, has been sympathy for Lyon and their supporters. Sympathy for John Textor? Not so much. And if you look about the centre of Lyon, there are all these banners inviting him to leave. inviting is a polite way of putting it, obviously. Someone sprayed Textor out on the side of the megastore in the centre of Lyon as well. And look, obviously he hasn't wanted it to go this way, but the timing particularly is abysmal, because one of the great figures of Lyon's past, one of the most important figures of their history, Bernard Lacombe, who former player, second top scorer in Liga ever, did a lot advising Jean-Michel Aulas to make the club established in Liga and established in Europe before he passed away at the age of 72 last weekend. There was a funeral for him this week. And yet that's all been overshadowed by this nonsense, really. And it's funny, because in this week where people have been mourning Lacombe, and the club, or the social media side of the club, has been promoting this film on Lacazette, the man, the legend, after he just has left the club for the second time and for good. You know, they sort of remind you really of how great this club has been and how far it's fallen in the space of, this guy's only been in charge since the end of 2022. Now, the Jean-Michel Aulas thing is interesting, because I don't think you can talk about Aulas as being separate of this. As JJ says, one of the iconic figures of modern French football, took over in 1987 and took the club from a yo-yo club into one of the biggest in Europe. But it had gone a bit awry in his last couple of years. But when he and Pathé, who the cinema company, or the other major shareholders, sold to Textor, they knew who he was and what he was, and they continued and just sold it to him anyway, because they wanted the money. So there was meant to be a sort of bridge to the new generation. Jean-Michel Aulas was appointed to continue being the president and run the club for the next 3 years. He got through less than a year before Textor fired him. And that really has been one of the main problems, that John Textor has fired people who are running the club for him, like Laurent Prudhomme went as well. Now there's rumour, because he's still very close to Aris, the main lender, that he might come back were Textor to be bumped from the picture. But, you know, the complete lack of joined up thinking and stability has been the issue here. You know, a lot of clubs are in much worse financial situations than Lyon. Lyon own their own stadium, which a lot of clubs in France do, and it's a huge stadium which has concerts as well as football. And this has been completely avoidable on every level. But what Textor has made clear every time he's talked to and about the DNCG is that he simply does not understand how French football runs, and he has no interest in understanding how it runs. Now, when this, as JJ says, the administrative relegation, the provisional relegation was handed down in November, he gave a press conference where he sat there and said, well, yeah, I don't think these guys really understand how Wall Street works or understand how the multi-club model works. Well, why is it their responsibility to know that? It's his responsibility to know how French football works, not the other way round.
And arguably,
and he has never grasped that, and he's never shown any willingness to grasp that. Even when he turned up for this hearing this week and said that an hour before the relegation verdict was handed down, said, everything's going to be fine, we're on top of it, the finances are looking great. And by the way, they're all promises. It's not actually figures on the paper. It's going to be fine. You know, he said, we will get the money from Crystal Palace. We will get the money from selling these players, etc. He's been saying he'll sell the Palace shares for the best part of a year, and they only agreed the deal at the weekend. So why would they budget with those figures? You know, the DNCG are right not to do that. He turns up at this hearing with a Botafogo cap on, having got directly off the plane from Los Angeles, and then when he comes out of the hearing goes, oh yeah, I don't think there are any flights directly back to Philadelphia for the Club World Cup. I might have to find a hotel for the night. Has anyone got any recommendations?
No, he didn't say that.
It's unbelievable.
Did he really say that?
It's unbelievable.
Actually, something even funnier happened. When Textor went to go into his meeting with the DNCG, some will see it as an omen, some won't. he actually had trouble getting through the door. It was the ultimate comedy scene, especially when you know what happened during the meeting and the verdict that was handed down hours afterwards as well.
Andy makes a point that I can't imagine anybody, we'd all be gobsmacked. The idea of John Textor saying that he doesn't understand the way, or at least the French don't understand the way football business works. There was a precedent to this, wasn't there, JJ, that Bordeaux got relegated. DNCG have got the power. They've got the teeth to relegate teams. How on earth could John Textor have not looked at that and thought this could happen to us?
Yeah, absolutely. The Bordeaux example is very, very pertinent right now because Bordeaux, another really historic French club, who last summer were essentially put out of their professional existence, still sort of clawing their way back up through the French footballing pyramid. Funnily enough, of all the clubs to go in front of the DNCG this past week, Bordeaux seems to have been the most untroubled under Gerard Lopez, coming out with just a very simple kind of salary cap for the coming season in the fourth tier of French football. But that is, a very, very relevant example. Bordeaux, one of the most historic French clubs up there, along with the likes of Lyon, Marseille, PSG, slogging it out in the fourth tier of French football for a second consecutive season. No professional status, which means no ability, to continue to foster talent in the way that they have through their youth academy over the years. One very, very key difference that I would mention and bring up now, because I was thinking it when Andy was talking on the topic. Lyon is a very particular club, not only because it owns its own stadium, but also because it's a publicly listed company. You can buy shares in the club. So the financials have to be even more transparent with a rare club like Lyon than they do anywhere else. And to the point about the DNCG, the DNCG is, in my opinion, is something that works very well in theory. However, for a number of years now, not just recently, but probably over the best part of at least a decade, I think the reality of the way that the DNCG works has needed to change. I'm not saying that I have sympathy with what Textor has been saying, and I do think that at times he has needed to really radically address the way that he's spoken, publicly about and to people, sort of indirectly addressing them via these impromptu press conferences and stuff like that. But it is a very outdated method of governing the clubs financially, and it results every year, this summer no exception, in an absolute bloodbath. It's carnage with these clubs when they're trying to make ends meet, especially with no TV rights money, especially without being able to budget for sales that they intended to make, during this current transfer period. And I do think that the possibility of Lyon following the same path that Bordeaux have trodden in the years before them, I don't think anybody can rule that out from happening right now. Is that in the best interest of French football? Of course it's not. And I think the real sort of reality of the situation is if the DNCG carried out their job, their task to the letter of the law, there wouldn't be enough professional French football clubs in healthy enough financial positions at the moment for there to be one professional division, let alone two professional divisions in France.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's, I guess the thing we have to say is this is not definitive at the moment, because as JJ said, Lyon have got a right to appeal. They find out the reasons for the decision on Friday, and from there they've got a week to register their appeal, include additional financing, documents, all that sort of stuff.
Looking for a leg to stand on.
Yeah, and look, there's precedent for this before. So for those who are slightly longer in the tooth, you might remember that at the start of 2003-2004 season, Monaco were relegated from the top flight. That was reversed on appeal, and they ended up getting to the Champions League final and nearly winning the title that year after the Monegasque royal family poured a little bit in. Now, I think the issue with Lyon is it's not even that they're too big to fail. It's that too many people with a lot of money stand to lose a lot if they do fail. And that's where I think Aris, the lender, step in. I mean, we've seen it before at Milan when things weren't running right. Elliott inherited the club instead of getting their debt paid, and I wonder if it's felt for a while, for months, as if this would happen with Textor. I mean, essentially, Textor in a football context is a little bit like Trump. You know it's not going to last forever. It's how much damage he can do before they finally get rid of him, really, is the question. Now, I guess it's come about because of this verdict a little bit sooner than we might have expected. So the word is that Textor might step aside from the appeals process, which is really good because he can't add up. And someone else will take the helm here, probably appointed by Aris. And as JJ says, maybe that turns into a permanent thing. Maybe this is the beginning of the end for John Textor. But if Textor was in charge of the appeal, they're done. They've got absolutely no chance of getting through this. And really, there's everything there for it to run correctly. But in terms of him not grasping the basics, one of the things that's come out of the hearing is the DNCG want to see the required money deposited in Lyon's account, and he's been showing them the Eagle Football Group accounts. So saying, okay, we've got this much money in the Eagle account, but they're like, well, that could be Botafogo's money, that could be Daring Brussels, as they're now called, money. It could be Crystal Palace's money because they're still owned 40% until this sale goes through. So really, these are basics. And if we're able to sit here and say, right, these are the bases that they need to cover, and Textor's not grasped that, clearly, I mean, the Bad Gun, the Ultras group of Lyon, put out this statement, and one of the key lines in that was, Textor is not the man for the situation. He never was, and he never will be. And I think that's fair. And I think the point that JJ makes about Bordeaux, even though there are crucial differences between Bordeaux and Lyon, is really worth pointing out, because these guys, and Gerard Lopez at Bordeaux is exactly the same, do not learn their lesson. Now, okay, Bordeaux might have had a stay of execution. They're still in amateur football in the 4th tier, by the way, which is a disaster for a club of that size, and didn't get promoted last season. One of his other clubs, Boavista, has just been administratively relegated out of professional football as well to the 3rd tier in Portugal, having not paid their bills and their players for months.
The funny thing about Andy bringing that up is it's actually really, really relevant to this, because essentially, if I understood it correctly, and admittedly my Portuguese written and spoken is not nearly as strong as Andy's, is that the money didn't arrive at Boavista in time, yet the money was in Bordeaux's accounts earlier this week. So the suggestion is that the money that Gerard Lopez had and showed in order to keep Bordeaux afloat is the money that didn't arrive in time for Boavista to be, kept afloat. So that, is also something that I guess kind of illustrates this juggling act, or the spinning of financial plates, we could say that Textor is trying to do via Eagle Holding Group at the moment. Yet the DNCG, because it is a specifically for the purpose of governing the finances of French football clubs, sees through that, and basically doesn't feel that it's a credible explanation each time that Textor comes to see them. And something else that's really important to bear in mind with these hearings, these winter and summer hearings regarding the budget, is a lot of it is built upon sort of mutual respect and trust. And there is absolutely zero of that when John Textor goes in front of the DNCG. It's constant sort of sniping at them, in public. And it's been made very clear that, the DNCG, certainly not at this moment in time, is not going to be going anywhere. So instead of sort of making the best of, what John Textor considers to be a bad situation, he's inflamed the situation further. And it might be that Lyon's only way now of navigating the DNCG is with somebody who can coolly and calmly discuss exactly what's needed. You provide the explanations and the evidence of, that money being in Lyon's accounts. And the reason why so many people are so vocal about this publicly as well, because it, adds further important context for people listening. Although it comes 1 year later, the accounts are made public via the LFP and via the DNCG. So, anybody out there who wants to consult Lyon's, finances since John Textor, stepped up to the helm can do that. And they see those numbers, and they look at the situation more broadly at the club and what's happened since then, not forgetting as well the fact that their super successful women's club was also sold off. And it feels like they see the writing on the wall, and they see themselves following, from a Bordeaux, but also from a number of these other historic French clubs who have either, had a very close brush, with fading into obscurity, or been pushed, completely down to the bottom of the French footballing pyramid to a point where they essentially have to start again.
Just very quickly, the appeal notwithstanding, who stands to benefit if Lyon is relegated?
Talking of historic clubs, it would be Reims, who were in the first 2 European Cup finals. So they were relegated in the playoff with Metz. Now, it will be them who take their place. And the thing is, in terms of uncertainty and planning for the future, obviously, having got relegated, they've already sold a couple of players. They can't get them back, can they?
And they've budgeted at half of what they probably would have done in Liga.
Exactly. They've budgeted for Ligue 2, so presumably they'll have to go back through the DNCG to make sure they've got a Ligue 1 budget.